Making data governance more accessible and actionable is the driving force behind Coalesce's newest acquisition, Coalesce Catalog, which we'll be exploring in this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. Welcome to a world of AI-assisted governance, metadata-driven analytics, and enterprise AI, meaning that data quality foundations are key to how we do, well, just about everything. In this week's episode, Sam's going to sit down with Tristan Mayer, one of the men behind Coalesce's latest acquisition in data management, to talk about Coalesce Catalog, an AI-driven data catalog tool for all data people. Before we jump over though, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with what we've got coming out, and make sure that you share the video as well so other people can learn from it. Alright, let's go and meet Tristan.
Well, hello Tristan. How are you doing today?
Very good summer on you.
I'm good. How is the weather in New York?
It's amazing. We're very lucky. Waiting for the bad weather this weekend, but during the week it's always beautiful.
Excellent. Not like your Parisian spring, or very similar to one?
A bit more warm, a bit warmer, which is pretty pleasant. But the Parisian summer is very, very nice as well. I'm looking forward to getting back there in a couple of weeks. How about in Auckland?
Well, we've just had a storm come through, tropical cyclone, but
We don't get
not
that in
bad.
Paris.
Yes. So, talk to us a little bit about Coalesce's new acquisition and data catalog product.
Sure. So that's a news that were gone out publicly a bit more than a month ago, with CastorDoc, formerly CastorDoc, joining forces with Coalesce. So two innovative startups in the data world joining forces in a single platform. From the catalog standpoint, where we started out was really on the data discovery, how we make sure each and every data consumer, data practitioner can find, understand, and trust the data that they have. And we've taken this approach with a very different one from the other governance tooling solution that exists in the market, knowing that governance is probably the last thing any data person wants to hear about. So I'm a former data person myself, and we know that when we hear about data governance, this is going to slow us down. It's a lot more process, a lot more things to do. We have to document, we have to tag, we have to make sure we respect our policies. This is not the way we do it. We do it in a way more simple, seamless way, and integrating to where the data is actually being transformed and created was an obvious next step for us. And in the way we create the documentation, making sure it's there since the beginning, it's by design implemented in the pipelines, to make sure afterwards there's not like any data steward 2 years down the line that has to come back on the pipeline and understand, okay, my data engineer did this 3 years ago. Why? What happened in that transformation? So shifting a bit left, the documenting and governance side of things, and making sure we have a really, really simple interface for data producers and data consumers to be reconciled under one single language and make sure all the knowledge is shared across the entire organization.
And can you give us an example of that in practice? So a use case where it's made a real difference.
So I think the most powerful example is one that will be very well known by any data engineer, is someone looking at a dashboard in the business side of the business, maybe someone in finance or marketing looking at the numbers, and numbers look a bit off, right? And what happens, even in companies that have implemented self-serve analytics where everyone is supposed to be data-driven, what happens is that the true self-service analytics never exists. Usually, they would come back to the data engineering team and ask, okay, where is this coming from? What's happening there? Why is it different from the number I have in my source system? And so what we provide is that since we're connected to the transform part where the modeling is being made, we can understand all of the transformation the definition that have been applied, and we surface that directly in the dashboard. So in a Tableau or a Power BI dashboard, we have this small extension that gives visibility to the end user about the upstream pipeline status, so whether it's fresh, whether it has run correctly, and that gives a natural language definition of what's happening in those pipelines. So if we look at a number and it's off or we don't understand where it's coming from, in the dashboard, in the consumption layer, we can show what's happening and what was done on the data engineering front. And that happens entirely automatically.
And so, in other words, providing a transparent data lineage.
Exactly, transparent and consumable. Because end users, they probably don't want to see all of the SQL underlying their KPIs. They don't want to see the entire graph. That's going to be super useful for the data engineers to do impact analysis, root cause analysis. For the end users, they just want to see, okay, why is it different and where is it coming from? And so we compile that lineage and we give that directly available in the dashboard. So enlightening all of the work that data engineers are doing, all of the modeling, underlying work that's happening on the transformation side of things.
And so going back to what you were talking about originally in terms of as a data engineer, you get a little bit hesitant when there's a conversation around governance in terms of how it slows things down. Can you kind of make a linkage to how ultimately it actually saves you time in terms of the governance side by having everything in order when there does come that point in time where you do need to go back and discover what has happened around something? How much time does it actually save in that instance? Have you had any experience of having to retroactively go back and figure out the data lineage and how much time it's actually taken?
Unfortunately, way too often. Governance is kind of always an afterthought. And that's why integrating it by design in the Coalesce Transform pipeline makes it so powerful. It's now companies, organization needs governance when it's too late. The urgency is when the environment has grown in complexity, has grown in number of assets, has grown in number of people using the data, and no one knows what's relevant. There's tons of duplicates, and that's where you lose tons of time in outgrown environment. So by saving time and implementing the best practices, documenting at the time you're creating the assets, you're avoiding everyone to create duplicates, because now you have discovery on what has been built, and at least people can see and start from something that exists. By avoiding losing time answering all of those questions, because again, the more you have usage of data in your company, the better it is, because that's how you prove the value. But also the more support you have to provide to have quality in your pipelines, to make sure they're reliable, to make sure you answer all of the business requirements. So you can save time in making business users, end users truly autonomous when using the data, increasing your impact by making them trusting what you're delivering to them, and also avoiding costs in terms of duplicates, in terms of unused assets that are never being used, or things that are duplicated. So all of that saves tons of time, and implemented at the right time in a seamless and fully integrated solution as Coalesce is the very best way to make sure you scale without losing track of everything that's happening downstream.
And if you put together the data catalog with a methodology like Data Vault, what are some of the advantages? Does this give you the best of both worlds?
Well, Data Vault is really, really powerful for certain situations, but for end users, it might need more complex and tougher to comprehend than more traditional star schema or other modeling strategies. So having a catalog with all of the explanation, with documentation around the different concepts, with reliable tables, with example of metrics or queries that can be run against the golden tables is very, very important, and increases again the impact and the value that it delivers to the business. I think it's even more important when the choice is to be made to go for Data Vault And we still want end users to benefit from working with that type of data.
Right. That's probably quite a good segue into talking about the end user benefits and the ability to give business users easier access to insights. Can you talk a little bit about that side of things?
Yes, because oftentimes data engineering work remains in the shadow. And end users, they have no clue what SQL is. They have no clue what a data warehouse is, even though the entire data engineering team is spending their days on it. And what they see is actual insights in a BI tool, or worse, sometimes it's just insights in Microsoft Teams or in Slack, where they can have access to data people that are running the queries for them. In an organization where we want those end users to be enabled, empowered with more data, with faster time to insight, this is where we can provide them with all of the relevant context, documentation, enablement that they would need to actually go by themselves and consume the data that the data engineering team is producing for them. So that's really the interface and the way they will be able to self-serve, on top of where they will probably query or see the data, which might be a BI tool. It's all the context around it and the trust that they will need to access it.
And can you give us an example of where that's made a real difference for an organization or enterprise?
So in a large organization where there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of assets in Snowflake, end users that are lost and they don't have the knowledge to go and dive by themselves in the pipelines, or even in just a data warehouse, and understand which table are they supposed to use to see the list of their customer. There's probably hundreds of tables with the customer ID column, and which one are we supposed to count to see what's the actual number of customer. And so what we've built with the catalog is we find signal in the usage of data, find what are the most popular assets. What is the table that is being queried the most? What is the table that is feeding the certified dashboard? And so we can identify where is the actual data that needs to be queried, get that actual number. And so depending on who's asking the question, we can analyze the profile of that person. We can analyze what they have access to, what is available on the data stack, what is of quality, what has been certified, what is on the opposite deprecated and shouldn't be used, and guide them directly to where they would see the data and where they would be able to consume it. So it's really making discoverable, accessible, everything that's being built from a data engineering standpoint, without compromising the access. That's really important, because oftentimes with self-serve analytics, it's like, okay, we open doors to everything, but then it's just create chaos and sometimes compliance issues. With us, it's only about the metadata. So the nice thing is that people at least know that it exists. And then obviously the data stays in your environment, stays in the data warehouse, stays in the BI tool where access are managed. And that's where we will guide and consolidate usage.
And I noticed that you have AI agent capability. So is that part of the interface for the end users? Like, talk a little bit about how you've used generative AI with the platform.
Yeah, 100%. So it's true that I haven't touched on it since the beginning, but when I'm talking about enabling the end users, that's exactly it. When you talk to someone in the finance team who's just consuming some dashboards on Power BI, or who's not very aware of what's happening on the data warehouse side of things, they don't want to use any other tool than what they're used to. They already have tons of systems, tons of tools that they're using. And so what AI is really good at is lowering the barrier of entry to knowledge, and especially in data. And so what we've done is that we've built an AI assistant on top of the catalog. So on top of all the documentation, all of the metadata, all of the lineage, so that they don't need to ramp up on how to use a catalog or how to use data. They can just ask and interact with metadata and data documentation in natural language. So they can ask a question like, how is a particular metric computed in a dashboard? And we would go for them, and our AI would go track the lineage, understand the underlying transformation that has happened, both in the BI, but obviously as well in the modeling layer, and summarize this lineage, those SQL queries, to give an answer of, okay, this particular metric, this is how it has been computed. this is the source system. This might be the filters that have been applied, and this is why you see different numbers from what you have on your source system. So we just summarize and make really accessible all of the data knowledge through AI. And that's the most natural way of answering questions. And for an end user, it doesn't change the way that they are working today. Instead of using our AI, typically before we come in, companies, they ask the same question, but to data experts. And data teams become a support team. Data engineers become data support for using the data that they're producing. We take care of that support for the data team.
So in other words, you're effectively allowing intuitive use of the data in an existing flow of work.
Exactly. So this famous Ask Data channel or data question channel on Teams or Slack. Today it's like, Samuel, where can I find data about this? Or what does this metric mean in my dashboard? Tomorrow at Coalesce, and you can introduce it as a new data expert in your team that's updated and constantly aware of what's happening in your stack. And the catalog will answer for you. And an end user, they don't even need to know that it's governance. They don't even need to know that it's called a catalog. They just need to know that, okay, this is a reliable source you can ask your questions to, because it's constantly updated and it's where we maintain our metadata and our data knowledge.
Right. Perfect. I think we've captured exactly what we need.
Lovely.
All right. Marvelous. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure we'll be hounding you for more content. Maybe we should get you to do the demo next time.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Hey, thanks for checking out today's episode. I want to thank Tristan for sitting down with Sam and having a conversation about this tool. It sounds really fascinating. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. Also, as I said before, don't forget to hit that like button on the video if you haven't already, or subscribe to the channel to get updates from us as we bring them out. There's a whole bunch of interesting content that we're doing at the moment, which I think you're going to like. Did you check out this thing that we did on the Death Star and Star Wars on Star Wars Day? Anyway, one of my favourite things. Anyway, make sure you look after yourself, live long, prosper, be one with the Force, and I will catch you all next time on the Data Radio Show.